He was never really accepted despite his wealth because he didn't have the name that came with it. So he was very big and ambitious in making his name, making his own family crest, you know, the rampant Colt statue. He had a symbol, a shield. He did all this stuff to like establish himself because the old wealthy families in the Hartford area never accepted him.
One of Hartford's most famous and influential residents was Samuel Colt, born on July 19, 1814, in Hartford, Connecticut. Colt was a sailor, inventor, industrialist, businessman, husband, and father, his claim to fame being the development, patenting, and popularization of revolvers, most famously the single-action Army and Navy pistols. As a child, Colt enjoyed things both mechanical and explosive. By age 15, he began working in his father's textile plant, which gave him access to tools, materials, and the factory workers' expertise. There he learned how to take things apart and put them back together, as well as how to make homemade fireworks, by way of reading the encyclopedia. His childhood dream was of being a naval officer, and because of this, his father sent him to Amherst Academy to study navigation. Ultimately, Colt was expelled after setting fire to the school by way of a 4th of July pyrotechnics show gone wrong. In 1830, his father gave him one last chance to pursue his dream of sailing, and sent him to study navigation firsthand by working as a navigator during a year-long voyage to Calcutta, India, on board a ship named the Corvo. During this voyage, Samuel Colt was quickly fascinated by the ship's wheel that could be rotated or locked in a fixed position with the use of a clutch. This would be the inspiration for his first prototype revolver design that would include a revolving cylinder, locking pin, and hammer, which he carved out of wood on board the Corvo. Before the name Colt would be synonymous with firearms by way of his revolvers, he actually failed numerous times in business but was never discouraged. His first firearms manufacturing venture was in Paterson, New Jersey, wherein Colt created repeating single-barreled pistols, rifles, and shotguns. These firearms, however, were slow to gain acceptance because of the lack of operational knowledge by general consumers, as well as the delicate nature of the weapons, and general underpowered powdered charges. Because of this, the manufacturing company quickly shut their doors. What ultimately saved Colt from complete financial ruin was a letter from Samuel Walker, a Texas Ranger, an officer in the U.S. Army. Walker, whom had had experience with Colt's revolvers while fighting in Florida during the Seminole Wars, asked Colt to create new revolvers with specific specifications for use by the U.S. mounted rifles during the Mexican-American War. These pistols would be a way to equip the mounted troops with greater firepower than single-shot carbines which they currently had. The military contract would ultimately lead to the production of the Colt 1847 Walker revolver, which was a massive 4.5-pound handgun with the intent to neutralize an enemy soldier or horse with a single shot. This contract saved Colt from bankruptcy after the commercial failure of his Patterson-era revolvers, and allowed him to purchase land and build his famous Hartford factory, leading Colt to become one of the richest men in America. Colt's Hartford factory was opened in 1855, built on a 260-acre campus that included the factory, skilled workers housing, recreation area, and Colt's mansion, the Armsmere. While researching Samuel Colt's legacy here in Hartford, we got in contact with Park Ranger Andrew Long, who gave us a private tour of the Colt factory, as well as the surrounding Coltsville area.
Behind me here is the East Armory, which was completed in 1855. That was the first iteration of the Colt factory complex here. And the signature blue dome on the ceiling, or on the roof of it, was initially inspired by his travels during his honeymoon trip. So Sam would visit the heads of state, the heads of war, the war departments, or the kings of the different countries that they visit, and he would do different sales pitches. He would often present some ceremonial pistols and revolvers plated in gold, and try to sell his goods to these kings around the world. So one of the royal families that he visited was the King of Prussia, and he was very inspired by Prussian architecture, and that's where actually this dome comes from. So he was really inspired to have something large, and he and Elizabeth were very ostentatious with their wealth, and liked to show it off in a lot of ways, so he was sure to put a big symbol of that, of him and his family, on top of his factory. So that's where the blue dome and the stars came from. And atop the blue dome is the golden colt, which is the symbol that he assigned for his family. So it's the rampant colt, it's called, which has spears in its mouth, and is adorned in gold, and he had a matching statue actually outside of his mansion called Armsmere, and his big gardens and giant landscaping in the middle of his big pond was another golden rampant colt, just like the one on top of the Blue Dome. The interesting partnership model of this park is the other places in the city that you can learn about the Colt story. So there's all the things within kind of the Coltsville neighborhood, but when Elizabeth died in 1905, she donated her entire very prestigious art collection to the Wadsworth Athenaeum, including money to build, and so one of the squares, one of the wings of that building is the Elizabeth Colt wing that was meant to house her collection. So the Wadsworth Athenaeum has a ton of the Colt estate, a lot of their kind of material culture, a lot of the stuff from their mansion, a lot of her art collection. It has the alleged wooden pieces that he carved on the Corvo with his inspiration and ideas for the revolver. So that's a great place that is telling a lot of the Colt story today. The Colt Manufacturing donated their internal firearms collection to the Connecticut State Library. Really? So they have an enormous firearms collection there. A lot of it's on display. They have the one of the two rampant Colt remaining pieces. So there's a lot of really cool tie-ins with even, you know, the architect of the Caldwell Colt Memorial Parish House and the Church of Good Shepherd also built the Mark Twain House, Edward Tuckerman Potter. So there's a lot of really interesting connections with a lot of Hartford historical sites like that. So we see this place as a real gateway to not just the Colt story here, but to the Colt story amongst a lot of the other historical Hartford sites in the city.
We also got in contact with Senior Warden Jack Hale from the Church of the Good Shepherd, who gave us a private tour of the church as well as the parish house. The church, commissioned by Elizabeth Jarvis Colt in 1867, was in memory of her late husband, who died in 1862, and two of their infant children. When her last remaining son, Cadwell Colt, died in 1894, she also commissioned the parish house in his memory.
These are the memorial windows. The one on the left is the memorial to Sam, and the one on the right is the memorial to the children who died. So this memorial to Sam is an image of Joseph in Egypt. Joseph, whose brothers sold him into slavery and eventually became the right-hand man of the Pharaoh. The reason this is here is that when Sam came to Hartford, he was treated badly by the city fathers. They didn't trust him, they didn't like him, and they made it hard for him to accumulate the property he needed, and yet he persisted and later became the richest guy in town, the biggest property owner, the biggest taxpayer, and the biggest employer around. So Elizabeth wanted to remind people of that, and this worked very well. Everybody realized why this window was here.
So we're standing here in front of the Colt Monument. So up at the top, you can see depicted Samuel Colt standing in his big, large overcoat, holding some papers in his right hand. He is a man of enterprise and genius depicted in the statue, and she wanted to depict him as that businessman, kind of always with the papers and working on his next project. And down in front of him is Samuel Colt as a boy in his teenage years aboard the merchant ship Corvo, where he allegedly got the idea for the revolver, and he's seen there whittling his wooden revolver cylinder aboard the ship with the chains and pulleys at his feet. So in 1862, Samuel Colt passed away, and he and his three children who died in infancy were actually buried here on this spot. But when Elizabeth Colt died in 1905, she had the bodies moved into Cedar Colt Cemetery, which is another historic cemetery in Hartford.
Somewhat ironically, we learned that the rampant Colt statue Sam used to market his firearms perfectly described his own life story as well. The word rampant colt is used to define an animal standing on its hind legs with its 4 feet in the air, but can also be used to describe something that is unwelcome or unpleasant, yet still flourishes and spreads unchecked, much like Colt's experience when first returning to Hartford. Sam was the embodiment of a rampant colt, and though he is gone, his legacy still stands strong to this day.